Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 6th of June, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today is Patrick Henningsen. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Mike.
And by video link, we have Mark Anderson, and we're delighted to also have Kit Clarenberg with us as well. Now, we're going to begin with Ukraine, Patrick, and the claim from the BBC that Putin will seek revenge, and that's typically emotive language from the Beeb.
Well, atypical, and in fact sounds more like the news of the world. If you read the other mainstream media, they say Putin will respond or retaliate, but the BBC's taking a little feather out of Rupert Murdoch's cap there. So there's the revenge is coming, apparently. Now, listen to this comment from Trump in the White House.
So would you consider to put more sanctions on Russia? Because this discussion is going on now for weeks and months, and you tweeted about it once, but then nothing happens. So
yeah, when I see the moment when we're not going to make a deal, when this thing won't stop,
is there a deadline?
at that moment, yeah, it's in my brain, the deadline. When I see the moment where it's not going to stop, and I'm sure you're going to do the same thing, will be very, very, very tough. And it could be on both countries, to be honest. You know, it takes two to tango. But we're going to be very tough. Whether it's Russia or anybody else, we're going to be very tough.
So the peace negotiations don't like that. They're going so well here. So and look, the problem is, and we'll play a little bit of footage here, but Trump's basically saying that there's going to be some kind of response from Russia. He's acknowledging that. This was from a public relations point of view, this is a very successful operation for Ukraine and for the fundraising operation that Zelensky is running with the West. As it stands on the ground in terms of material differences on the battlefield, it doesn't look like it's that consequential, but huge in terms of public relations in places like Westminster, Brussels, and Washington, D.C. But, you know, how long can Trump carry on with this aloof approach to foreign policy where he says, I had no idea that they tried to assassinate Putin in his helicopter. I had no idea about this massive drone strike hitting their long-range nuclear deterrent. And this is the same president that says this war would never have happened if I was president. Well, he is president. And we now have a major nuclear potential provocation. So this whole aloof shtick is just getting long in the tooth with Trump. So I'm not buying it, quite frankly, and I don't know anybody who actually is. So this is one of the problems here. So Trump is, I think, who knows, somebody could have just told him, well, this is what we're going to do, and he telegraphs these vague signals. He's constantly doing this, and you're just left to interpret what he says. Meanwhile, Lindsey Graham is gallivanting around Kiev, and Mike Pompeo is in Odessa, meeting the leader of the trades massacre in Odessa, who is one of the more unsavory characters in the Ukrainian parliament. So that's what's going on. And meanwhile, they're trying to conduct negotiations which look like they're kind of dead in the water at Istanbul, with an attack like this coming before it, Mike. So
right.
This is the problem that we're facing here. So we'll take a look at just to review here. This was the operation. We'll bring this up on screen. If you remember how this went down, these were basically container trucks that were disguised as who knows, mobile sort of homes or something like that, but contained sort of autonomous drones, probably using the Russian telecom system, but maybe using Starlink satellites. It's not certain how this was organized. And these were deployed. This was 15 months in the making, and supposedly Trump didn't know about it. I highly doubt that. If he is true and he is honest that he didn't know about it, he's not in charge. And that's a whole nother conversation,
right,
as well. So, but this is a level of asymmetric warfare, Mike. The potential for this is hugely disruptive for any country, especially Russia, who is exposed because it doesn't have, like the United States, an ocean on each side. As a world superpower, it has to guard a lot of border and territory, and it's a bigger problem. So this is, I think, the future of warfare, they're calling it, Mike. And this is hugely dangerous. If this is what NATO is planning, a relentless waves of these types of swarms, then we could be in for a very long and tedious conflict.
So last week we reported that the UK government had announced the kill web as part of the Strategic Defence review, or digital targeting, web as they like to call it. Now, this is said to enable quick-fire targeting of enemy assets, including through offensive cyber operations. And they're saying that this kill web is going to be based at the new cyber and electromagnetic command, which they're establishing at the same time. And that's going to lead, these are their words, defensive cyber operations and coordinate offensive cyber operations with the National Cyber Force. And so the question is it a coincidence that the drone operation, the Ukrainian drone operation, is called Spider's Web? Is this an allusion to the kill web idea?
I don't believe in coincidences, especially two that appear in the same week, Mike. And the announcement preceded the operation. So obviously they're patting each other on the back in the halls of Westminster on this.
Right. So, well, why don't I welcome Kit Clarenberg to the program? Kit, welcome to the program. Is it a coincidence that these two terms sound similar?
No, I mean, much like Patrick, I'm no believer in coincidences. I mean, I think that I actually respectfully disagree potentially that Trump wasn't in the loop on this. I do err on the side of him actually having been kept out of this, and this having been a British operation, which was planned perhaps with CIA knowledge, but without their oversight. We at the Grey Zones, ever since the proxy war erupted in February 2022, have been systematically documenting how it is Britain that is leading escalatory actions, concocting all sorts of wild schemes to up the ante in the proxy war, with the ultimate objective of keeping the US invested in this and embroiled in this and trying to prevent them from withdrawing, which I do think there is a significant strain of sentiment within the US public, within the US government, within the Pentagon and the CIA, that they realize that this is a very costly, unwinnable quagmire that is the cost-benefit ratio is not in their favor at this point for a variety of reasons. Now, what I think is quite interesting as well is when this attack happened, and then there were subsequent strikes such as underwater attacks on Kerch Bridge and the blowing up of bridges in Kursk and Bryansk. All of these actions were advocated in leaked British intelligence files that we've reported on at the Grey Zone. So no prizes for guessing who came up with these ideas and encouraged the Ukrainians to go ahead with them. Is that initially there was this flurry of intense media hype about these strikes. The Daily Telegraph rather bombastically reported, Trump said Ukraine held no cards. Well, they just proved that they hold many cards. The BBC said tub-thumpingly, Ukraine has just sent a very powerful message to Russia and the West. And then we fast forward only a few days, this is less than a week ago now, and Politico acknowledges that the military utility of these attacks was actually very limited, and it's had absolutely no impact whatsoever on the frontline reality, which is that Russia is advancing at a ever-increasing rate and scale. They are seizing new territory every single day, inflicting vast casualties on Ukraine every step of the way. Reuters has also acknowledged that there is no evidence that anywhere near the amount of strategic bombers that Ukraine claimed to have damaged or destroyed. I think they initially claimed it was 40. Reuters admits there's no evidence to support this. I think that the true number is probably a tenth of that. This was a much needed propaganda victory at a time that Ukraine is on the brink of collapse on the front line. And that initial burst of exuberance has rather faded. There were numerous politicians, including Boris Johnson, who we know sabotaged personally the peace talks in Istanbul in April 2022 between Russia and Ukraine by flying to Kiev and offering Zelensky the blankest of blank checks to keep going when they were a signature away from a rather equitable peace deal. That he stated this shows how inventive and intelligent and resourceful the Ukrainians are. It's time to ratchet up the sanctions. It's time to finish this and end Putin's reign of terror. Carl Bildt, the former Swedish prime minister and a latter-day EU apparatchik, said this is like something out of a 007 novel, which I think was probably the inspiration and point behind this, as we've again, at the grey zone delved into, a lot of the British military and intelligence planners who are behind Ukraine's daring operations, which almost invariably end in total failure, are quite clearly informed heavily by Hollywood readings of World War II. There was, for instance, the attempt to capture a beachhead in Krinky, which lasted, this is in Russian-occupied Kherson. It was an operation that lasted for 9 months, wave after wave of British-trained Ukrainian Marines were sent on high-speed boat ribs across the Dnipro River without any air cover whatsoever. It was hoped by the British they could recreate D-Day and march from Krinky on Crimea, an outright victory. In reality, most Marines were killed en route due to relentless Russian fire. Many people who actually who made it there were killed immediately upon arrival by Russian artillery and glide bombs and drones. This is just one of many total disasters, including the Kursk incursion and the 2023 counteroffensive, which we now know and has been confirmed in the mainstream media were plotted by the British, apparently with the US not being overly happy about these things. About these operations going ahead and being skeptical of their chances of success.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. It's great.
A couple of points just to underline what Kit says. He's really demonstrated there that every single major negotiation, a threshold point of Britain has been there, probably behind the scenes, working with Ukraine to basically sabotage any potential advance in bilateral or multilateral negotiations. So, I mean, that's a pattern that's pretty well established going back for the duration of this conflict.
Right. Okay. Well, something else I'm really keen to get Kit's view on is this, because as Charles mentioned during his report on Keir Starmer's shiny new strategic defence review on Wednesday's programme, we need to have a look at the authors. He did suggest that I was going to do that today, so let's have a look at them. Now, the primary authors were these three: Lord Robertson, General Sir Richard Barrons, and Fiona Hill.
That's Dr. Hill.
That's Dr. Hill. Now, as I mentioned on Monday's programme, Robertson is a former Labour Secretary of State for Defence and later served as Secretary General of NATO. Now, he also served as Scottish Secretary at one point. He is from Scotland. He lived in Dunblane. And he successfully sued the Sunday Herald over a post on the Herald's Reader Forum that he had helped. The accusation in the post was that he had helped secure a gun license for Thomas Hamilton, the man who carried out the Dunblane massacre. Now, I mention this because it's related to the online safety report that I'm going to make later on in the programme, but he successfully sued over that, and that made a difference to what people could post on forums subsequently. But coming back to the other characters in this play, General Sir Richard Barrons is the next on the list, former commander of Joint Forces Command, a rabid Russophobe. Here's a clip of what Barrons had to say during a 2019 interview that David Ellis ran with him, which you can find on the UK Column website.
If you're going to build armies, navies and air forces that are different, they're built around manned, unmanned and autonomous capability. UK industry can make this. So this has to be good for prosperity, because for the first time for a long time, UK industry at scale will be making things that other people around the world need to buy. And so this is good for export prosperity. And so if our politics gets this right, we can fix our defense, we can influence our friends, we can deter our enemies, and we can boost our industry. I mean, this, for me, is in the no-brainer territory.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely part of the theme of the Strategic Defence Review, that war and death around the world can be used as a driver for industry in the UK and create jobs. Fantastic.
It's definitely in the no-brainer territory.
Absolutely in the no-brainer territory. But we've got to remember, if we put this on screen, that he is a close friend of Chris Donnelly, founder of the Institute for Statecraft and its Russophobic Integrity Initiative project. And Chris Donnelly himself was a special advisor to 4 NATO Secretaries General over 13 years, including Robertson. And now this is a quote from Donnelly during a Defence Committee hearing that I attended in 2019. In hybrid warfare, everything is a weapon. And that is basically the theme of Barron's opinion, but also Donnelly's opinion as well. And the third person, finally, we have here is Dr. Fiona Hill, a British-born American foreign affairs. Well, she describes herself as a specialist. I don't know. We may have different opinions of that. Who's also a total Russophobe, and her Russophobia is totally focused on the person of Vladimir Putin himself, with analyses such as Putin's personality disorder and what if Putin disappeared for real. Now, she's a spook. She became an intelligence analyst under George W. Bush and Barack Obama at the National Intelligence Council, where she was a senior expert on Russia and the former Soviet republics, including Ukraine. And then in between stints at Brookings Institute, she was also deputy assistant to the president and senior director of European and Russian affairs during Trump's first term, when she was on the National Security Council. So she's quite a woman. So, Kit, let me ask you, what are your thoughts on these three?
Well, I mean, it's difficult to know where to begin. Although, I mean, just as a preface, you mentioned Barron's connections to Donnelly. In 2014, there was a British Parliamentary Defence Select Committee hearing on the future of Britain in NATO, and Donnelly explicitly stated that Britain should take a lead on arming and training Ukrainian forces in their brutal crackdown on the civilian population in Donbass, because this would encourage the US to refocus on Europe at a time it was pivoting under Obama to Asia. And Obama also explicitly stated that Ukraine is not a core interest of the US, but it is of Russia. Therefore, we shouldn't interfere. So he has played a significant role in getting us to where we are now, and he is overseeing Britain's contributions to the proxy war in secret. But yes, I mean, Lord Robertson was, I believe he was Blair's defense secretary, and he is in 1998 he initiated another strategic defense review, which set out a very bold vision for creating British Empire 2.0, and it called for the creation of British aircraft carriers. Fast forward to today, and those aircraft carriers were which took many decades in the making and billions in the making, are now scheduled for scrap because they've been found to be completely useless, which is quite ironic. But Barron's is a very interesting character. Again, you mentioned the Institute for Statecraft. In 2016, Barron's gave a talk at the Institute, which was rather incendiary, and it effectively laid the foundations for the Ukraine proxy war. And he talked about how, due to the rising power of China and Russia, global engagement is no longer on the West terms. The West's power is waning, and there is a risk that the US can no longer protect us. And he stated that we need to deal with Russia by doing things that are serious. And if no catastrophe happens to wake people up and demand a response, it was necessary to manufacture such catastrophes. And then you have the launch of Integrity Initiative and all of these stories about Russian meddling, which were black propaganda laying the foundations for war against Russia, which served to turn European governments and populations against Russia. But yeah, I mean, he is in that same talk, he explicitly stated that, well, we need to be spending billions more on defence, and we need to seriously beef up Britain's military capability. capabilities. In terms of concrete ideas in this strategic defence review for doing that, their only answer is spend more money. Well, I mean, the obvious problem with that is you can print money, but you can't print bullets or tanks or soldiers. And on all three fronts, the UK is significantly lacking, not least because it doesn't have a defence industrial base anymore, or much in the way of industry. I strongly suspect that those calls will come to nothing. Fiona Hill, as you mentioned, she is a absolutely lunatic Russophobe of some standing. I don't think that she can even speak Russian, but she is frequently cited as an expert on Putin's Russia, and yes, takes a typically very hawkish line. In a bizarre coincidence, she happened to know Christopher Steele personally, the disgraced former MI6 operative who was behind the Trump-Russia dossier, and she introduced Steele to Igor Danchenko, who was Steele's source for all of the dubious claims in that dossier. She may well have played some kind of role in its fabrication. Yeah, I mean, the contents of the review are kind of unsurprising. They talk about how Russia is the gravest threat to Britain, and that Britain needs to undertake significant measures to counter this. I mean, this is the product of enduring post-imperial delusions about Britain's importance and power on the world stage. Britain wants to believe that it is a major global power. I think they're just seen as a source of major annoyance and nuisance by the Russians. I don't think they're taken particularly seriously. And I think that attitude extends to most European countries at this stage. They've disarmed themselves by sending all of their weapons to Ukraine. They have bankrupted themselves by sending money to Ukraine. And they've also electively cut themselves off from Russian energy supplies, which has just deindustrialized the entire continent. I think we've hit the brick wall of illusions here for a lot of Western powers. Although it may well take quite some time for the reality to catch up with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and staying on this subject of the UK and their role behind the scenes in some of these conflict zones, this is an interesting story which has come up here. This is the Cradle, obviously one of the best English language Middle East news outlets here. But more signs of Britain grooming Syria's al-Qaeda-rooted government. And you can see there the new president sporting a Savile Row look there. And you're talking about here the rise of a London-born Muslim Brotherhood activist to the heart of the Damascus politics reveals an even deeper layers of the UK's long war to rebrand al-Qaeda's power and legitimize it as the Syrian government here. And they go on, and this summarizes Britain's outsized role in shaping the conflict, bringing al-Qaeda to power, whitewashing its leadership, and embedding UK operatives within the political infrastructure in that country. And this brings us to a great article here by Kit Clarenberg. This is up on his Substack, Global Delinquents, the column, and how MI6 helped HTS seize Syria. Now, there's a lot of familiar faces in this article, Mike, including perhaps the person who recommended the Savile Row Taylor for al-Jilani, Hamish de Breton Gordon. But look at these two likely fellows. These are the new Chuckle brothers. Mike, this is Alistair Campbell, Rory Stewart giving a warm welcome to the new self-appointed president of Syria, the former al-Qaeda leader in Syria, al-Baghdadi's deputy at ISIS. They're platforming him, legitimizing him. It is quite an extraordinary thing there. So we can get into that. I want to bring Kit in here right now. Kit, great article. Obviously, there's a lot of familiar names, and all of the theater that we've seen over the last 15 years to destabilize Syria, you can see how it all fits together here. But your thoughts on this?
Yeah, sure. So there was At the start of May, or it might have been mid-May, there was the U.S. ambassador to Syria, 2011 to 2014, Robert Ford. He gave a talk during which he acknowledged that in 2023, a British non-governmental organisation had approached him and sought his personal assistance in transforming HTS and Shara or Yolani into politicians, rebranding them in advance of their seizure of power in Damascus. Now, that firm was revealed by the Independent Arabia. I didn't know the Independent had an Arabic language outlet, but apparently it does. These comments, it was revealed to be the firm was revealed by Independent Arabia to be Intermediate, which was set up by Jonathan Powell, who was a key advisor to Tony Blair's government. He was chief of staff throughout Tony Blair's 10 years in power. He was one of the key architects of Iraq, who knew that Saddam Hussein didn't have weapons of mass destruction and wasn't a threat, but thought that it was good to get rid of him anyway because he bought into this humanitarian interventionism nonsense preached by Blair and the neocon gallery. That report in Independent Arabia was was missed by the English language media, including the independent media, with the notable exception of Vanessa Beeley, who wrote an excellent article for UK Column, I believe, which is well worth checking out. But yeah, there has been in the manner of a kind of low-grade theatre production in which you have a small cast playing different roles at different times. The same names keep cropping up and up and up. And yes, as you mentioned, Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, who was on the front line of propaganda operations in Syria, also was an MI6 agent staging chemical weapons attacks to blame Assad's forces for breaching the US's red lines and trying to encourage US intervention. And he also set up a bunch of bogus humanitarian groups again, were part of a wider propaganda effort to demonize Syria and Russia. He recently went to Damascus and met with HTS and gave a rather bombastic interview to an outlet called The National, where he said, well, the Syrians that I know say that these guys are the real deal, and Britain is uniquely placed to make a real difference in post-Assad Syria, and we can give them advice.
Okay, welcome back. Sorry for the technical problem. That knocked us out for a couple of minutes. Kit, let's come back to you. You were just starting to talk about Hamish de Bretton-Gordon.
Yeah, well, no, I was saying that, Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, he was heavily involved in regime change operations and was, among other things, smuggling soil samples out of Syria to prove that Assad's forces employed chemical weapons. It is clear from mainstream media reporting on these operations that the purpose was to trigger something like either the destruction of Libya, like a saturation bombing campaign, or even a Iraq-style all-out invasion. They didn't succeed in that. There is a number of other British intelligence cutouts that, I've reported extensively on the operations of ARC, which is run by a veteran MI6 officer called Alistair Harris. And it's quite clear from their leaked internal files that they were preparing in 2013 for a major escalation and intervention by the US, which never materialized. But their covert operations and their creation of bogus humanitarian groups like the White Helmets, that endured, and they endure to this day. So they Britain might not have gotten the intervention it hoped for, but its hand-picked puppets are now in power in Damascus. Their hold on power is questionable. We had Marco Rubio saying the country could descend into civil war, which is, a certainly a possibility, given that the central government does not have popular legitimacy. Yolani was a largely unknown figure in Syria before taking power. You still have elements of Syrian society, including people who are armed, who remain loyal to Assad. And Baathism. You have the Kurds who want to carve out their own state in oh God, sorry, it escapes me now.
Rojava.
Rojava, yeah, which is a key kind of CIA MI6 base of operations in the region. So and then you have Turkey wants to chip away at Syrian territory. Israel wants a chunk of the Golan Heights, if not more. Israel are worried about other powers encroaching on this, to the extent that it's been reported that they've asked US officials to implore the Russians not to leave, because they think that might affect the balance of power. So it's quite a mess that they've created for themselves. In the meantime, British officials are meeting with high-ranking HTS officials, which even the British media admits is completely illegal under British law because they're a proscribed terrorist group. Such as the topsy-turvy world that we live in, they're not going to be prosecuted, whereas people wearing Palestine solidarity badges are.
Yes, indeed.
Well, I think it just goes to show, Mike, the level of, this is another level of soft power. This is really weaponized levels of subterfuge soft power. And what Kit has outlined in his article is fantastic details and great research, great reading, great journalism. Kit Clarenberg, editor of the Grey Zone UK, is also publishing at Substack, as well as on Mint Press News. He writes for a number of different outlets as well, all excellent outlets. Kit, thank you very much for joining us on the UK column.
Yes, thank you, Kit. Thank you very much. And all those links to Kit's work will be in the show notes, of course, on the UK column website. So look there for them. Thank you, Kit. Now let's